The Prime Minister did raise the human rights issues, the consular issues, including Yang Hengjun, the Australian who remains detained in China. So those conversations were had, but behind closed doors. Has Labor shown the coalition how to do diplomacy, that it should be done behind closed doors as opposed to the megaphone diplomacy we saw at times during the former government?
Well, Australians will judge this visit on the actions and the outcomes from those actions. And that remains to be seen. To date, there seems to be no movement in terms of speeding up the very drawn-out process that China is offering Australia's wine industry. It's not acceptable where winemakers should have to wait 5 months for a review to conclude. These tariffs are unjustified. They should never have been put in place in the first place, and they should be removed. Just as Dr Yang Hengjun should not be indefinitely detained, as he currently is, he should have the legitimacy of proper sentencing, transparency around his charges, and he should, of course, be released and returned to Australia. So all of these issues, we will have to wait and see whether outcomes can be achieved. That's the key test.
On Israel, there's a lot of scrutiny right now on Israel and its response to Hamas and the terrorist attack that was perpetrated upon Israel on October 7. What's your reaction to, say, the Greens walking out of the Senate and other demands upon Israel at a time when we're looking at a tragedy unfold in Gaza that can't be described as a catastrophe, but all of the moral responsibility, it seems, according to some observers, including the Greens, lays on Israel and not as much upon the terrorist group, which is in control of that strip, being Hamas?
Well, petty games and pathetic tactics such as the Greens walkout do nothing to strengthen Australia's position, and they do nothing in relation to the Middle East, and they show a complete naivety when it comes to the complexity of what's being dealt with. Let's remember, the Greens voted against the parliamentary resolution condemning Hamas for the brutal and bloody terrorist attacks it undertook on October 7. Now, in terms of calls for ceasefire, here's the pathway to ceasefire. Hamas should lay down arms. Hamas should surrender its arms and its military capabilities to Israel. Hamas should hand over its leadership and its terrorists to Israel. Hamas should release the hostages who are being held. That would be a pathway to ceasefire, rather than the idea that somehow the Greens would just wish, and others, that the fighting stops and Hamas is given an opportunity to rearm, reorganise and strike again in ways that would just see yet more innocent lives lost and the perpetuation of the type of violence that we have seen.
Has the Greens' analysis and response been undermined by the fact that a number of their representatives were immediately critical of Israel, even in the days after the atrocity was perpetrated by Hamas? For example, Senator Faruqi saying it was a disgrace to have Israel's colours illuminated on this building.
I don't think any aspect of the Greens' commentary has ever had any credibility, and frankly, I don't really want to dignify it with a lot of commentary at present. They encouraged people to the protests at the Sydney Opera House, which saw anti-Semitic actions and language used in the most horrifying and vile terms. They refused to vote for a motion in this parliament, agreed to by Labor and the coalition, condemning Hamas. And now we have these pathetic stunts and walkouts. They are not reflective of Australian views and sentiments. They are not reflective of the broader will and position of this parliament, and it is important we will work to try to maintain bipartisan support for Israel and their right and need to remove Hamas and to disable Hamas from presenting a future terrorist threat to Israelis. And in removing that, it gives them the best chance for some type of stabilisation, and down the track that stabilisation to enable Israelis and Palestinians to live a more peaceful coexistence.
Just quickly on the rate rise, the increase, do you accept that there is a lot of international pressure here in terms of the forces at play driving up inflation and the pressures in our economy?
There have always been international pressures, but firstly, Labor always said the international pressures didn't matter. Secondly, when they inherited the Australian economy, Australia had some of the lowest inflation rates compared to other countries. Now our core inflation is higher than the United States or Canada, than France or Italy or Germany, or than Japan, It's higher in Australia than all of these other advanced economies. After the second Albanese budget, economists said that it was expansionary and that it would cause inflation to be higher for longer. And now Australian homeowners and mortgage holders are going to be paying a very dear price as a result of Labor's expansionary budget and of their failure through two budgets to get inflation better under control.
Senator Birmingham, thanks for your time.